I quit my job as a journalist back in 2013, so I haven't worked in an office in 9 years, but I spent 20 years working in an office before that. And it was the most unproductive time of my life. I mean, I spent half of every day chatting with coworkers, about things that didn't have anything to do with work, about, getting up and going to, the vending machines because I didn't want to hear people yelling at each other, that sort of thing. And I used to always, it was funny because I've told this story before. I was working for the Contra Costa Times in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1999 when I wrote my first article about hybrid working. And at the time, several tech companies, most notably at the time, PeopleSoft, which has since been acquired by Oracle, PeopleSoft had just built a satellite office in the East Bay for people to come in near their homes and use phones, use video conferencing, use computers, with the idea that you only had to go to the corporate offices half 3 days a week, and that you could work from home and then use these satellite facilities when you needed to have video conferencing and stuff. And it was a front page story in the paper, and I talked to all sorts of experts at Stanford and Berkeley about how this is the future of work and stuff. And my bosses were like, "This is fabulous. This is amazing. We're telling people about the future of work." And I said, "Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I would like to work from home, one day a week as well." And my boss looked at me and she said, "Are you crazy?" And I was like, "We literally just wrote an article saying this is better, that this is the future." I said, "I could do everything I do for my job from home. And part of my job requires me to be out of the office half the time anyways, because I'm a reporter." And she's like, I want you to be where I can yell at you." And she literally said that. And every editor I had up until the time I quit journalism, well, actually my very end of my career, I had, written best-selling books and stuff. And so I could kind of do what I wanted. But up until then, every editor I had, I would ask, could I work from home a couple days a week? I would be much more productive. And they would be like, "Are you kidding?" And yeah. And it's amazing because this is a job where they're used to you being out of the office for days at a time, but they still, when you're at the part where you have to type into a computer, want you to be doing it, in a cubicle outside their office, which makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
And I even would times when I had to work from my house because I was interviewing someone up near where I live versus my office, my copy would be in hours earlier, and they'd always be like, "Wow, you got it in so fast today," and stuff like that. It's great. And I'm like, "Yeah, because you let me work from home. I wasn't distracted." And there's just this innate resistance to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to what we talk about, doesn't it? We've evolved in technology, we've evolved in processes, we're trying to evolve ways of working, but the ways of thinking and behaving that need to accompany that evolution on one side haven't kept up. And we still seem to be stuck in this 80s business school, if not 60s Mad Men management style that people are now becoming frustrated and clearly unhappier with. And there's something's got to give, and it is giving in certain organizations. We're seeing quiet quitting. We're seeing people loudly resigning and walking out and moving to organizations that are being more progressive. What do you think is the actual root cause of all this, Vivas? I mean, this isn't pandemic driven. This is long standing that's been happening for probably more than a decade or so now.
No, I think so. I really think that the pandemic was more a catalyst than anything else. This is a change or a tsunami that was just waiting to happen. And I think the pandemic just accelerated it. And I think a lot of that has to do with development and employee development. I mean, you talked about quiet quitting, and a lot of people are talking about quiet firing, which is essentially, having an individual, not giving them any feedback, not giving them any coaching, not giving them any developing. And in many cases, managers don't even realize that they're quiet firing their employees by, it's called management by silence. Mm-hmm. So one of the key things we found about what drives engagement, of course, the manager does, but conversations. And when I say conversations, I don't mean just, hey, do your job, or, here's the task. Yeah. It's about individualization. It's about coaching that's individualized. It's about focusing the individual on who they are, what their strengths are, what their aspirations are. How many times do managers actually have conversations? I mean, the performance review is the dreaded performance review, right? I remember a manager once told me, I'd rather have a root canal than sit in my performance evaluation. So it's that has to change.
But who's making that change? Who's enabling that? Because
many
again, we always look upwards.
Yeah.
We always look upwards, don't we, to these poor managers who are clearly incompetent at doing their job. But I don't see the level of training. I'm ex-military. I used to get leadership training every year from day one. From the minute I left initial officer training to the minute I retired, every year I was getting some form and level, up to a year away to do learning and training. And you just don't see that in industry. And therefore we call these managers and leaders out for being inadequate in leadership roles. But I turn around and say, well, who's trained and helped these people become what they should be and what the expectation is? Because a lot of them have imposter syndrome. They're floundering around they're reading up on LinkedIn and personal training. But there's no collective systematic mechanism, I think, to help individuals progress as they go up through the ranks.
Yeah. Marcus, I think the corporate world can learn a lot from the military and the armed forces, because we always see that in terms of trust, in terms of engagement, we see, thankfully so, the armed forces actually having higher levels. I'd be very worried if that was not the case, But I do think that when you think about who's responsible, sometimes it's HR, and HR needs to do these training courses. But management and having conversations is not something that you can just sit in a classroom and get managers to get better at it. And I firmly believe that not just management, but leadership, it's through experiences. And that's what I love about the military and how leadership is taught in the military is through experiences. At Gallup, we call them key experiences. And that includes things like failure. So have you failed? And what did you learn from that failure? So in a lot of work I do around leadership, when I work with a cohort of future leaders, I start with doing what I call a key experiences audit, which is essentially, what are the experiences you've had? When have you failed? What is the most difficult and most challenging assignment you've ever been given? And that tells you a lot about where to focus your energy, whether it's with managers or with leaders. And I'm of the firm belief that managers also need leadership training. This age-old debate about leaders and managers and how they're different. Managers are as important as leaders and as your corporate office, top honchos are.
This is one of our principles that we're always hitting with our clients, is that anyone in your organization who is responsible for other people or responsible for decision making is a leader. It doesn't matter whether they're, a assistant to the assistant manager on a retail floor, or something like that. Anybody who is giving direction, making decisions is a leader, no matter how low they are on the org chart. And if you don't enable them to be leaders, then you're setting yourself up to at best have suboptimal performance, and at worst to fail.
Thank you for tuning in to The Thinking Leader. Check the show notes for more information about the topics covered in this episode. There, you'll also find a link to our free assessment. Click on it right now to find out if you are a red team thinker with a red team culture.